meeting of the Committee of the Whole for the Metropolitan Council for October 15th, 2025. Our first order of business is the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Lilligren this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, and the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
We're on to approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, we can proceed. Seeing none, moving on to approval of the September 3rd, 2025 and September 17th, 2025 Metro Council Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. If there are no changes or additions, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss, seconded by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the minutes are adopted. Now we're moving on. We have 3 information items this evening. The first is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. We have a project update and some feedback, and I believe we have Veris Dawes here to present. Oh, and Merritt Clapsmith. Welcome.
Madam Chair, committee members, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Veris Dawes. I'm a planning analyst at the Community Development Division, and I'm also the project manager for the 2025 Regional Economic Framework. Joining me today is Bridget Tuck from the University of Minnesota Extension School. She's the main author of this report. She's also one of the members of our consultant team who are behind me. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for their tremendous work. They have been amazing. So today I'd like to give you a little bit of a review of the 2025 Regional Economic Framework. And we sent you a survey just to solicit your input. I don't know if you had a chance to do that. In case you haven't, we sent you an executive summary. And if you didn't have the opportunity to get to that, I will be talking about the key takeaways today. So hopefully we will get your input on that. So let me start by talking about a little bit what we're going to do today. I'd like to give you a general idea of our status update on our current work and just talk a little bit about what we have done so far and what we intend to do. And then I will be talking to you about the key takeaways of this report. The report itself is 100 pages, and I tried to boil it down to 5 slides, and hopefully that will stir some conversation. And then I will talk a little bit about our next steps and timeline, and just to give you an idea of when we are hoping to wrap up the project. And finally, we will have a group discussion. We have some questions for you to prompt the conversation, and we'll go from there. So in terms of, before we start, I'd like to remind you that we have 9 strategic priorities that structured this document. And these were the same 9 strategic priorities that were covered in the 2020 Regional Economic Framework. So we're just carrying through those priorities and trying to see how things changed along the way and what we could do to change them, to advance them in general. So, so far we have done a lot of outreach to various groups, and the 3 boxes on the top, they show you who we engaged along the way. And based on the feedback that we got from these groups, we have mostly Bridget drafted the report. And we brought that report before you so that we can get some feedback from you before we take it to the public for a public comment period. So coming back to the 5 key takeaways, the first one of these key takeaways is about the connection between the workforce and jobs. So we do have jobs available in the region. In fact, for every 100 job opening, we have only 74 unemployed workers. So job availability is not really an issue, but it is the disconnect between jobs and workers that seems to be the problem. And by the way, I should say all these key takeaways are contributors to one overarching problem in the region, which is lack of, or the stagnancy of growth in the region. So I'm going to be going through takeaways which underlie this particular trend, and hopefully will give us some clues about how we can get out of that pickle, basically. So the disconnect between jobs and workers is primarily because of a skills gap as well as an access gap. And to address the skills gap, we need to do a better job of aligning the skills of our workers with the credentials they earn and with the social or the support systems they need to be able to obtain and retain jobs across the region. And in addition to the skills gap, we have a situation where we have housing affordability issues or lack thereof to some extent, and also limited transportation options. These are all factors that undermine the ability of workers, especially low-income workers, to access jobs physically. So the second takeaway is about about another important way we can build our workforce in the region, and that is attracting and retaining the labor force or talent from elsewhere outside the region. The forecasts are fairly clear. We are going to be growing our workforce in the future primarily through immigration, and that could be immigration coming from other parts of the country or from abroad. And however we get this labor, if we want to bring them over here and keep them here, we need to do a better job of advertising our region as a place with high quality of life. And for that, we need coordinated regional branding efforts that are specifically tailored to specific groups. And this might be one way of boosting our appeal to both individuals as well as businesses. So the third key takeaway is about business growth and some of the challenges we have, especially after the startup phase. So we seem to do a good job in terms of having corporate anchors, very strong corporate anchors, and a solid startup survival rate. But somehow the businesses are stalling right after starting up. And small businesses especially, this is an issue because most of our employment comes from small businesses. So this seems to be a problem both in terms of employment and also it has other implications such as, patents and innovation. These are startups are important source of these elements in our region. So what is missing in the mix is, first of all, venture capital. Venture capital tends to flow to the coasts, and we're not getting enough of that. The second thing that is a problem is limited incubator capacity. We have some sectors where we have pretty solid incubator capacity, like the medtech hubs. But overall, for the most part, we do not have enough incubator capacity. And also, what is most important is we're really missing the coordinated support systems that are needed to scale up businesses after the startup phase. So the fourth one is racial inclusion and its how it impacts economic growth in the region. So over the last decade, we have made some progress. There is narrowing of certain gaps in certain racial gaps, especially in poverty rates and in incomes. But for the most part, key outcomes, we're still experiencing large racial disparities. And this is really impacting our growth because it is continuing to undermine opportunities for BIPOC residents, both as workers and as business owners. And if we do not tap into the full potential of the region as a whole, then we are falling behind. And this is reflected in the inclusive growth statistics. We're falling behind our peers in terms of inclusive economic growth. And this is, in turn, perpetuating long-standing and intergenerational racial inequities. And finally, the last key takeaway is about the new or the emerging climate economy. And the transition to a clean economy presents both opportunities and challenges. And we are in a good position to take advantage of these opportunities, partially because of the aggressive climate targets set by the state. We have other reasons for that too, but we do also have some challenges. We need to invest in this sector to be able to reap the opportunities. And so we need to make significant investments in infrastructure. We need to build out our supply chains in the region. That's a missing piece. And finally, we need to expand our green economy workforce training because there is an overall shortage of workforce in this particular industry. So to give you an idea of the timeline, we are going to have a conversation today, and we're hoping to get some feedback from you. And we're hoping to incorporate that feedback into the next draft of the report. And the report is going to be coming before you, before the council, on November 12th, and we're hoping you could recommend it for public comment period. And then the public comment period will be from November 13th till December 22nd. And we're hoping that the feedback that we receive from the public will be incorporated back into the report for your review in January. And we're hoping the full adoption will take place in early February. So once we finish the process itself after the adoption, we're gonna hopefully have some implementation measures in place. And I'd like to briefly talk about potential implementation steps we could take, some roles that the council could play along the line. First, the council could hold future convenings as needed. The partnerships that we build along the way could continue the conversation as we move forward. And these partners are essential for us to promote or advance the strategic priorities that the region has. A second role the council could have has something to do with data updates. Council staff is already building some implementation metrics for Imagine 2050. And some of these implementation metrics are pertinent to the goals of the regional economic framework. So while we're updating the data for the Imagine 2050 effort, we can certainly use those data updates toward implementing the regional economic framework as well. Also, in the past, the council issued letters of support for potential applicants to EDA grants. We can certainly continue that practice going forward. And we could also use our communications tools to spread the word about the report, especially to potential grant applicants who might not be aware of the fact that this report is essential for putting their applications forward. And finally, we could build upon the partnerships that we generated, and hopefully all of these partnerships will be influential in promoting or boosting the impact of the regional economic framework. So I would like to open the floor for discussion, and we have 2 questions we wanted to ask you to structure the conversation. The first one is, you have heard the 5 key takeaways. How much do they resonate with you? To what extent do you feel like these were accurate descriptions and they were in alignment with your experiences? And the second question we have is, are we missing anything? Are there any key elements of the regional economic landscape that we might not have included? And we would like to hear from you about these things. Just one more plug before we start the discussion. The survey link is still open. It will be open until the end of the week. So if you do not have time to review the document in its entirety, the survey is set up in a fashion that you can chime in toward specific sections. And sections are short. I'm plugging it in. They're like 5 to 6 pages each. So any feedback you have would be wonderful. And you could click on the link basically on the PDF, and that should take you right there. And I will open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I will just say I feel like I'm back in a time warp loop, because I used to work at Greater MSP and regional indicators, and I know we were working in partnership with them so that we could get this body of work together so we could apply for federal grants. Back then, we knew that we were not attracting enough people to this region. We're kind of always seen as a flyover state, and it snows all the time. So they started a branding program for the region because they really viewed their role as branding for the region called Make It MSP. And they would actually go into some of our peer regions or competitor regions where we knew there was strong alignment with the skills that we needed and would actually land on the ground and find partners there. And I don't know where that has gone over the years, but it was very apparent 6, 7, 8 years ago that these same things were a problem in this region, or an opportunity, however you want to look at it. The other piece that I think is interesting is that as it relates to immigration, if we have not, as a region, come together and leveraged the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we should be, because when I ran for state senate unsuccessfully 20 years ago, we were talking about this as a competitive issue for our region. And I was very much about making sure that we could streamline immigration and we could really help to bring people here to fill those gaps, because the Chamber of Commerce, at least for everything that I was absorbing from them, said that it really, our economic future was going to be hinging on that, because the home population here wasn't growing fast enough, and we have a great quality of life, and we have great schools, and we land on all the top 10 lists and so on and so forth. So, I'm just wondering, have we, or whoever the we would be in the partnership, brought in the chamber? And, I would imagine the U.S. Chamber still has that position, because if anything, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So I think this is so good, but I'm still like, the older you get, time keeps getting shorter, so I'm getting frustrated in a positive way to get things happening. And then as far as affordable housing, we all know what the issues are there. If we don't, I don't know who else would. But I would say that as we talk about this issue, I'm still going to drive the point that incomes are not keeping up with the cost of living and inflation. And so when we talk about there's not enough affordable housing, and, government then is asked to fill the gap, which sure, there's a big role for government and we play a big role in that. But I'm just wanting to make sure that, while things are probably better in Minnesota as far as the income, or I should say, yes, income gap between men and women, we, as a whole society across this country are lagging behind where we were 10, 15, and 20 years ago. In fact, on the way here, listening to the radio, they were talking about, why can't we get those 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath homes built? And quite frankly, in the interview and in the information, they were talking about that, well, builders, they're in the private sector, most of them, and they, want to also maximize their profits. And especially if there's private equity in it, they've got, investors to pay back. So I continue to want to dig deeper into all of this so that we can really start to move that needle. It's a giant needle to move, right? And we all know this because this is, if you've been around, this is nothing new. But, instead of gazing at our navels, how do we hold people accountable that are actually solidly behind this outside of this organization and that could be in alignment with us? So maybe we're already doing that. But I just am very grateful for this excellent work that you're doing. And I call upon all of those around the region and the state and upper Midwest or whatever you want to call us. Let's come to the table around this. We still, Greater MSP is still there. They might still be working on it. I don't track them as closely as I used to. So anyway, they've got the table, their board is, the CEOs, the top CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs around this region. So those are my comments. I think it's right on, and yet we're saying the same things that we've known for a very long time. And we're not going to compete as a region if we don't start to make some bolder moves, I guess I would say.
All right, thank you for your comments, and there's several hands up, so I'll get to everybody. Just want to follow up on Councilmember Johnson that Greater MSP will be here next week. Is that correct?
Great.
To go through the regional indicators dashboard, so it's good timing. That couples up very well with this. We will go Councilmember Tyrone Carter, Councilmember Lee, and then I think it's Lily Green. So, and then we'll keep going. Yeah. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that the quality of life indicators, looking at those really resonates with me. I came to Minnesota about 20 years ago, and what I looked at was the quality of life indicators. So that was the magnet, but we know that's a moving target. And so I think we have to stay online with where the bullseye is and make sure that the quality of life indicators that we're reflecting as being positive for this region are on point with the ones that are being sought nationally. Because, of course, we all know that one of the things Duluth is cited as being a climate magnet in the future for climate refugees. But this is the secondary location. And so I think we need to play off of that, and we need to play off the welcoming spirit of Minnesota. And there's a long legacy from Hubert Humphrey on. And this place has been a home and a welcome place for refugees, for the Somali communities, Hmong communities, and people, but that's not always known nationally. And so people seem to think about things in through a regional lens. And so we have to make sure we're reflecting out the positive things that we have to offer from a national perspective. And if we do that, I think we're going to do well. And of course, I like and enamored with the BIPOC considerations, especially for small business, being a small business owner. So I think there's a lot here, but there's a lot here to be worked on. So, but thank you.
All right, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. Whoever is going to be in charge of marketing and trying to attract new talent has to take into consideration that we have a federal administration that is hostile to immigration or is being more restrictive to immigrants who can't, buy a gold card. And so we have, 3 years and 2 months left under that system. And so that has to be taken into account when we're trying to attract talent from across the country or across the world.
All right, Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thanks for this work. I want to add my thanks. This is just really enlightening. And I have a question to start with and then some comments, and especially building off of some of the comments that Councilmember Johnson made, for sure. But my first question is, we look at this, there's only 74 workers for every 100 available jobs, right? And so this might be kind of a simple question, but I'm just wondering if or how there's benefit or advantage to focusing on those 26 missing workers, right? And get kind of specific to that. Who are they? What can we do to close that gap? Are those strategies that make sense?
Yeah, that's one of the things that attracted my attention, actually. the racial disparities in unemployment rates really make a big difference. We could close that gap by 70% of that gap just by simply eliminating the racial gaps. Okay. So we should, it pays for our region to invest in that, closing that gap. It makes a big difference. We have different problems. Growing the jobs is one problem. We still are struggling. We haven't grown at all since pre-pandemic, which is, compared to our peers, we're in the bottom, literally. So that is an issue, but we are also not tapping into our existing potential, and especially the racial gaps. It makes a significant difference.
Thank you. I suspected it was something like that, so thank you for affirming that. And then, Madam Chair, just a couple of points I want to make, and now I'm losing my way in my notes, but I was really also struck with the figure of there's an additional $18 billion of income that could be generated here by doing what you just talked about, by closing that gap. And that really caught my eye. And so now I'm going to get to your questions more. And these takeaways do resonate with me, but they've been resonating with me for decades, much like Councilmember Johnson was talking about. I've served on the Minneapolis Convention and Visitors Association board for 20 years, right? And probably 15 years ago, we sort of entered into this space about recruiting workforce to the region. And so it's a little frustrating. I'll have to add my frustration to Councilmember Johnson's that we're not moving in the right direction by this time, but the eternal optimist, I'll believe that we can make more progress. And then one thing that always strikes me about this, and I say this all the time in public, and I don't really have the data to back it up, but I think it's broadly believed. I mean, you just said it as well, that it's small businesses that drive workforce growth and drive the workforce. And so when we talk about organizations like Greater MSP, great organization, the state chambers or the large city chambers, great organizations. But I think it's getting more granular down into the community level chambers. Councilmember Pacheco wasn't here. He would say something about the Latino chambers. There's a Minnesota American Indian chamber. It's involving these chambers that aren't in the Fortune 500 lists, right? And I think there's something there that we could do, we, meaning the Met Council, but we, as a community, as a state, to kind of shift the conversation away from just the corporate behemoths and into where the economy really is sort of happening, right? And so just to put that thought out there, and then the council role part. Well, here's what I was going to talk about this earlier, but the idea, it's one of our strategic priorities of regional brand and image, right? And so you look to organizations like Greater MSP or chambers and things that they kind of work on that, but we put it in our strategic priorities, and I'm not really sure what we as a council have done to really sort of improve the regional brand and our regional image. And as we all know, especially since George Floyd's murder, that's something that we particularly, Minneapolis as a city, but Twin Cities as a region, need to address. And I wasn't here last week. I got some kind of last minute bug, but I watched the Committee of the Whole presentation on or the council presentation on improving the Committee of the Whole. And there was a list of example of potential Committee of the Whole topics. And one of them was tourism, which to me kind of sits very close to this regional brand and image. And so I just wonder if we can explore what our role can be. I mean, we have brilliant communications people. And so if we move into marketing, is there a more robust role that we can play? And just overall in the council role on implementation, I feel like they could be, council used the term bolder. Wrote my note as more aggressive, right? Is there a more aggressive role that we can play? And it feels like the points under the council rule slide are a little soft, right? And it doesn't, for me, it doesn't really hit the economic impact we have as a unit of government, for example. Are there more aggressive, bolder things that we could be doing as a unit of government to be closing that 26% or whatever of missing workers? So I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks,
And
Manager.
I will take the point of the kind of the marketing, messaging part as a good topic for a committee with the whole in the future. I think
I
that's a
agree.
great topic. All right, Councilmember Tony Carter, and then we're going to.
I'll start where you landed, where Councilman Littleburn landed, and that is on the council role. I do appreciate the bullets that are here. I agree that there's much, much behind them that we're not seeing right here. And a very, very key part of it would be the council's convening role, the council's communication role. You know, all of the key takeaways certainly resonate, as well as the strategic priorities, understanding that, and somebody else mentioned this, we won't do all of that work here. It won't all get done in the corporate realm. You know, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for many hands to be engaged in this work. And I think that the council has a responsibility, because we are an information agency, to put out as much information as we possibly can in these topic areas. You know, as we look at the key takeaways, having an entire community that understands that and can impact it from where they sit is very important. You know, understanding the strategic priorities and where we're working on those priorities and how you can help. You know, we can't always reach out and get the help that we need. Sometimes seeing the information and just understanding the strategies that are at play, and also then translating that to how a foundation, a community organization, a business, a government organization can play in that space can be very important. And I'm not so sure that we must limit this to our meetings, but I think that our responsibility for getting information out has to take on some really, really different and creative methods. You know, certainly our website and what we are doing with respect to our regional plan and the setting of goals and the tracking of the work is important here as well as with our regional plan. And so I'm curious to understand those strategies, to understand how we set the goals. And actually, you know, this isn't just for the federal government. It isn't just for those applications. It's really for everything we do and how we do it in coming years that we're attempting to lift our region. So getting information out in extremely different forms, you know, even if we're doing webinars and getting, you know, these various pieces of information out with those partners who are working with us. Makes a lot of sense to me. Convening at the council and bringing the partners, but also other elements of the community together with us to understand this information, I think is really, really key and important for us. So the council role, I agree, we have to flesh out. And also, it needs to be very, very big, because we have the power to get the information, the research, and also to communicate these priorities and strategies to others who can then do their part. And finally, I'm very concerned for the 26. I'm also very concerned for the 74 because of that mismatch of skills and opportunities. And so as we look at strategies for growing the region, it's just as important that we think about how to address the needs of that 74 who aren't all matched to one of those 100 jobs. And I think that's got to be a very, very important part of the work that we do and that we communicate. I'm not sure exactly what all of that does in terms of our agendas. I know it's a lot, but I am certain that this challenge is one that we have to meet and that we can meet as a region as we engage with others, communicate, get this information out, convene, bring in experts, and understand the strategies that will address all of these key takeaways. And to do that means we really have to think about how we use our meeting time, how we use our website, how we use our creative communications capacity. And I would just ask that that be centered in our agenda, that we find a way to, within the context of our committee of the whole, discuss our role and really net the work that we will do over coming years.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Jenkins and then Seabrook.
So, thank you, Chair. I'm going to sort of flip the coin for my perspective from a new member to what Councilmember Tony Carter said. I'm not sure we're set up to be the spearhead and do the bulwark of all of this effort. I think it's important. A lot of it resonated with me, but I still will say I think the council role part of the report was also very soft, ambiguous. I would have liked to have seen more connection with the stuff we do every day. I'd like to see a tighter tie as to how can we use our transit system to improve the connection of prospective employees to employers. How can we use economic planning? How can we use, livable communities grants, stuff like that. The tools we already have and we know. So those are the things I was looking for. The one area that resonates most with me when I was in Maplewood on our Housing and Economic Development Commission, one of the things that worked for us in similar efforts was to go to Century College, just up the street, and say, here's what, in our business retention visits, this is what employers are looking for. We went to Century College and said, you're looking for students, we've got employers looking for jobs, here's the gap. And we connected them and tried to fill that. With all due respect to the home of the Gophers, what other educational institutions are also engaged with this, or how do we outreach to them? Because in reality, Century College, a Metro State can turn and pivot much faster than the University of Minnesota. And not to say the University of Minnesota can't, address that gap very well, but for a quicker turnaround, are we engaged with other educational institutions to help fill that gap?
Councilmember Cedarburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know how this will fit in, but I do think it's a gap that we're not talking about. We're talking about growth, and yet we're running into issues already about managing our resources, and particularly water. And so if we're going to have, as Dr. Carter said, the quality of life, the tourism, the bringing people in for what we have, we're already running into issues on just managing our green space, managing our water, competing, industry versus people versus cost, just the cost of getting drinking water. 20 years ago, nobody would have thought it's an issue. It's a serious issue in the region, from Crystal to Southwest, Southeast, Northeast now is limited growth because of limited appropriations of groundwater for drinking water. The cost to implement some of these solutions is going to be tremendous. I'm not going to throw out a number, but it's tremendous. And so somehow that's got to be a strategic priority that I feel is how we're going to manage all our natural resources, which water is a big part of it, but there's many others. And we can't put our head in the sand right now, because if we do, in 10 years, we're going to be 30 years behind. I mean, it's got to be matched right now, I think.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. I really resonated with a lot of the comments from the council members today. I was fortunate to be able to attend the last comprehensive economic development strategies with many partners there. And one thing that I did notice was a lot of synergy and interest in the same goals and the framework that we have. So there's that willingness and that awareness of what the issues are. And what I've been hearing is, the strategies will help us to identify what's needed to close those gaps. So I think, aspirationally, we all want to get there. In the Imagine 2040, one of our areas of focus was economic competitiveness. And we hear a lot about this in the report. And with 2050, the dynamic and resilience is what we're focusing in on, but I think obviously those two are merged. So I think that's important to recognize that economic competitiveness is still important. In terms of regional branding and marketing, I think a lot of times the marketing and the branding is focused on just the positives, but I think also highlighting what the gaps are, and that's important to look at the data, disaggregate the data, and look at how economic inclusion can help us close the gaps. And one of the tools would be the regional branding and marketing. I also heard that we need to look at some of the resources that we have at the Met Council, such as the Livable Community Grants and the transit-oriented development with our bus rapid transit and our light rail. That will help us to provide the support that is needed for those economic strategy goals. And the way that we have modeled and have improved our livable community grants is generating more interest by developers, by cities, to use those grant opportunities. So we need to advocate for more money as we get more applicants so that we can do more as a council, I think. MedTech, for example, was talked about, hubs. Those can happen along our corridors as well. And we have cities that have plans for MedTech corridors right along our Blue Line Extension corridor, for example. So there is an opportunity to support that area. Employers, I know, based on my experience in working for corporate America, have been ready for a long time to try to close these gaps. But what we have an opportunity to do as policymakers is to work with employers and utilize policy to close those gaps. But sometimes our policy is not in alignment with the needs. And not just at Met Council I'm talking about, I'm just talking about in general, locally in the state of Minnesota, maybe even federally, where we are not aligned. So maybe advocating for more alignment towards these strategies, I think, will be helpful.
All right, additional questions or comments? Councilmember Wolf, and then I've got a couple.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it feels to me like we've lost track of the basics. We're looking for all these shiny things, but things like Councilmember Johnson mentioned great schools. Our schools have been scoring worse and worse, and Mississippi is now way ahead of us. So we can't brag necessarily about, and that doesn't help our kids get ready to be in the workplace if you can't read and do math. So I feel like we should be making sure we get the basic stuff right to have a good foundation rather than going for whatever shiny. And we also need to get back to doing cost-benefit analysis on investments that we make. For example, the whole green energy thing, nobody talks about what is going to happen with the weather based on what dollars you put into green energy. And as a result, we've been ending up with a less reliable electrical grid that costs more in a time when we desperately need more and more electricity to keep up with the demands of the system. So to me, no, it doesn't resonate, unfortunately. I mean, I would really like us to have a very strong region where every kid can get a job. And I see some bright points, like in Lakeville, the school district and the chamber work together, and there's a huge industrial park on the south end of Lakeville. There's discussions that it may be the biggest one in Minnesota, but nobody ever wants to actually do the math to find out. But they work with the companies in the industrial park to put their machines in the shop classes in high school so kids can get with the real machines. And Dakota County Technical College and Inver Hills have been working with employers to get people ready to step in a job the day that they graduate. And especially for kids that come from lower income families, that's really important, because if you get your bachelor's degree and become a barista, there isn't anybody to subsidize whatever's going on with you. You got one chance to really get a job that you can live with, because you can't keep getting more and more training or not have a good job. So if we don't connect kids with real skills for real jobs, that hurts the most vulnerable kids the most. The other thing that's been concerning is these programs that haven't actually been providing the services to vulnerable people. I mean, the housing stabilization thing, those people really, really need help. And that people were taking a bunch of money and not helping them. If those people got help, got job skills and got jobs, we could close that gap. But if people are taking the money and not providing the services, we're never gonna get people where they need to be so that they can be successful. Because it's not about subsidizing wherever people are at, it's about helping them be the best person that they can be so that they don't need the subsidies anymore.
Okay. Any additional, Councilmember Cameron?
Madam Chair, you're getting better at that. But, you know, peripheral vision. You know, I am very engaged in this conversation. I think agree with so much of what has already been said. And I think, you know, it's very meaningful to me because this is how I spend my day job, is thinking about these issues and how we can improve the economic status and stability for immigrant and refugee communities. And tied with that is all of these other elements that we've talked about. And we do exactly, you know, we have a program with Century College and we do all of these things. And it is, you know, I think the comments that Councilmember Wolf just made are so critical that, you know, there's, we partner with a lot of different entities across the region in that work, and it is, there is a lot of great work happening, but it's happening in a disparate way. It's happening, you know, there's one project that Hennepin County wants to do in Brooklyn Center School District, and then it's happening all over in small ways, but where is a cohesive strategy for the entire region? Because it's not gonna happen if everyone has kind of, you know, sticks to their small corner of the region and doesn't broaden the focus. And I think to Councilmember Jenkins' point, you know, as a regional body that has elements of affordable housing, of transportation access, all of these economic indicators, there is a role to play for us in that, but what, you know, is it the convening body? Is it some other element where we're contributing to a larger public discourse around this? I think that is, you know, it's an interesting question. I don't know that we're not going to solve it. You know, no single institution is going to be able to solve it. And so I think we need to start thinking about how are we convening more partnerships around that. And even with the chambers, it's on my radar because I've had those conversations with with Greater MSP and with the business partnership around it. And then I think that it is, you know, even those entities, you know, and the ethnic chambers, everyone is doing something different. They all have their little elements. Even chambers don't all come together. And so it's a monumental task. I don't mean to say that, you know, it's so easy to convene a meeting and then we'll all come together, but it is a monumental task. And I think it's larger than one committee of the whole discussion, but it is something that I think, you know, as a body, we have to figure out and be a part of how we can convene everyone together.
I think you're reading my mind because that's kind of what I'm thinking. This isn't completely our role. This actual activity is grounded in, we need to do this to apply for EDA grants as a region, so the region can. But we also want it to be value added to the greater conversation that we're having, whether it's with greater MSP or the chambers or DEED or whoever the people are around the table. But I think it's tying sort of the collaboration, convening partners, all of that together, because I agree we need to improve our own branding and our website, but we want it to line up with whatever greater MSP, who's probably more the person out doing the sales than we are. And so whose roles are what? So I think these were just sort of great conversations in general. I just wanted to note one thing. So my prior life, not so long ago, was in working mostly with startups. And I will say your takeaway on how startup community works here is spot on. It always has been, where we have a great startup network. We've got these big companies going from small to big, because the small is what builds the big. It's those new ideas that has historically been a problem here. And in the last 9 months, there is no money available either. So like there's going to be a serious issue over the next probably 5 years because of this 6 to 9 month period that we're going through right now. So it's really interesting. One other thing I would really like to get more information on is for the skill gap. And I don't know how to do this. This might be a more internal thing that we do. So there's skill gap within the workforce. How much of that is reflected in what we're seeing with hiring in our own organization? And are there ways we can instill more mentorships or apprenticeships and that type of thing? So what kind of mismatch are we seeing in our own workforce? Might be something to kind of take on. So.
Madam Chair, happy to bring that one back. I could do it off the cuff, but I'll look for the data on this one first to help inform it a little bit. Thank you. I usually do too. It was such a great comment. That's why I was pointing at you. But
I like numbers, so don't make up numbers.
We'll follow up on this. Thank you.
All right. Okay, everyone, any other questions or comments? Great discussion. I'm at their request, please go fill out the survey if you've not filled out the survey. So any other final comments or?
No, thank you for your attention, and I really would like to see you filling the survey. That would be awesome.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, on to our second information item, which is the Imagine 2015 Outcomes Measurement Program. It's the continued discussion, and we have Kristen and Sarah back again. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Again. Nice to be back to pick this up. Okay. So, Kristen Rybaturas, Research Manager in Community Development, here with Sarah Nelson, our Senior Researcher focused on outcomes measurement. Really here to pick up the conversation where we left it last week. We managed to present on 3 of the regional goals that are listed here, and we had 2 more to kind of revisit and present if there's a discussion about the measures related to those areas. We've also have available a slide focused on policy-related measures, which have been, the discussions on those have primarily been at the committee level, but we are open to taking feedback or questions about any of those measures as well, or any other part of this program, as this is the last conversation we have scheduled before we come to you next week, asking for authorization to release this amendment for public comment. So we can spend this time however it's needed to feel comfortable taking that action. This is just a brief recap of last week's conversation. We just wanted to make sure that we were capturing these takeaways. You will see modifications to our program narrative and potentially some proposed measures. I jotted a few down from the last conversation. So, we have a little bit of fine tuning to do before we bring those materials, but we wanted to just recap that. And also just to share, again, we've discussed or presented each component of the program so far, the program narrative, most of the regional goal measures with the 2 scheduled for today, and those policy measures have been discussed at the committee level. So we just want to, share what this full body has seen. Once again, we'll just plug the program webpage, which does have all of the policy measures updated as of last Wednesday. We'll be pushing all final updates by Friday. There's a couple things rolling in, just to make sure that everyone has time to look at those materials before next week's action. They will also be summarized in the technical appendix and just draft materials for the amendment. And with that, I'll just turn it right over to Sarah to talk about the last two goals. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So first, we will talk about leading on climate change. This goal primarily relates to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and adapting our natural and built environment so that we are resilient to the impacts of climate change. This goal also aligns closely with the equitable and inclusive goal, particularly in the context of environmental justice and the disproportionate climate burdens. So previously, we, as the Met Council, focused on sustainability. This is back in the Thrive 2040 era, with more of an operations focused on transit and wastewater. But with Imagine 2050 and other statutory changes, we've developed and started implementing the Met Council Climate Action Work Plan. And we now have a broader focus on climate change in the context of all infrastructure and investments. So the last regional goal is that we protect and restore natural systems, which includes land, air, water, vegetation, and wildlife, as well as their connections to ecosystems, natural cycles, and human society. So previously, before Imagine 2050, the Met Council's work focused primarily on conservation and resource management, mostly in the context of parks and water. But now it includes the protection, integration, and restoration of natural systems in all regional systems. And it also shifts from talking about natural systems in the context of human livability to having intrinsic value. There is a lot of overlap here with the climate change goal, and you'll see that in the measures as well. But natural systems also includes things like drought, flooding, pollution, and the loss of green space and biodiversity. So with that, I believe the measures are included as an attachment as the additional materials for this agenda. So we will pause here for a brief discussion. We have some questions on this slide, but we certainly welcome any other thoughts, feedback, or comments, questions that you have. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Great. Any questions, comments so far? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Just a couple other things to consider related to what we just talked about, the number of clean tech jobs and business job growth in this area, energy burdened communities, energy burdened households, the waste diversion rate, so how much is being recycled or composted, active transportation share, the percentage of trips by walking or biking, and then energy use per capita for your consideration.
Thank you.
All good. Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm gonna sound nitpicky because I'm gonna pick on one word, but then I'll tell you why it's important to me. On slide 5, our first goal that we're covering today, we use the word lead. What are we doing that no one else is? And I'm going to keep that rhetorical for right now, because I think as a policy-making body, I don't think it's bad to be a fast follower. Leading means risk, and the reason it's important to me is I don't know if we are taking risk in doing things that others wouldn't in this area. And the word to me implies that we're ahead of everybody else in something. So while it's one word, to me it sets expectations. And if we are leading, then I want to see us shout that a lot louder than we are. The stuff I see is, we're very good at what we do, but we're not the first ones trying this. We're not the only ones doing something else. So it's one word, but to me, it sets an expectation.
Councilmember Johnson.
Just to that point, thank you, Councilmember Jenkins. So I just need some clarification, because I would agree with everything you said in the context, if we were saying that this is who we are now. But I think this is this not goal-oriented, where we want to be the leader? Not saying that we are, so maybe there needs to be some clarification within that statement. And maybe, maybe we're gonna be the leader in the areas that we're supposed to be the leaders in, and others will be leaders in their areas too. So I just remember on the work group, I think there were some of those discussions we had in our work group about some of these words, and then we're like, okay, this is where we aspire to be, so as a goal. So I don't know if that helps you, and I'm not sure if it even helps me, because I feel like we did have some of those discussions too.
And that language is specifically in Imagine 2050. So, Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, so in answer to Councilmember Johnson, then I would just ask, if we are taking those steps to lead, let's call those out. We are the first to do this. We do this bigger. Where are we leading? And it doesn't necessarily have to be we are leading the country. Are we leading the region? But there's nothing in what I see here that describes us as leaders or aspiring to leadership. If we are, we got to call it out. We got to point it out and say, this is what separates us from being really good. There's nothing wrong with being great and doing it well. But to me, leader just means a little bit more.
Regional Administrator.
Madam Chair, I'll shout one out for you, and then I'll take the rest of it. I think there's a question, like operationally, I hear you on your comments loud and clear. I think as a planning agency, the website you were presented a number of meetings ago about the greenhouse gas emissions reduction tools that cover every community profile in the region. And these are first of its kind levels of specificity, both around what is and what could be, and how to have conversations in communities to think about climate that enables a level of depth and potential understanding of how each community contributes to the broader goals. I would say in that area, I would define that as leading. And it's in the planning space, which doesn't feel maybe as tangible as some others. So I understand some of what you're saying, and I think we should continue to work on that as we go.
I would just ask that what you started with, let's make that a paragraph in one of the next slide decks.
Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share that in my observation, this really is a setup for us to collect that information, to be able to reflect it, and in particular, in the context of where our peers are, to be able to report back how we're doing. So I also agree that we've got a long way to go, a lot of work to do. I admire some of the things we're doing. But what we want to do is measure this work so that we see our leadership and are able to share that in the future.
Additional, Councilmember Lilligren, then Councilmember Carter.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to defer to Councilmember Carter if you want to.
No.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
mind?
So thanks for this. I think these measures are really good. I really want to thank Councilmember Lindstrom for being so specific about additional measures. I think those were great ones overall. I like the approach we're taking on climate change, and one of the terms that I have really liked is that we don't talk about natural resources anymore. We talk about natural systems, and I think we're really much sort of closer to our environment in the way we're changing our perspective, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate Councilmember Jenkins bringing up the points about what this regional goal means. And it's interesting because I've always interpreted it a little differently. And to set these regional goals, we did go through quite a bit of process. And for me, the word lead doesn't mean being first in everything. It means that we are using the leadership that we possess as a regional unit of government to move in this direction. And so I just wanted to bring that up. To me, it's not about being the first to do something, but it's assuming, exercising the leadership that is rightfully ours as the regional unit of government to advance this regional goal. Thanks.
Councilmember Tyrone Carter.
Yeah, I would say similar. If we're going to say we're in the lead, then in the deck of cards of organizations, I would probably want to say we're in the forefront, but then reveal the whole deck, to see where do we fit in that. Are we in the top 10? Or are we truly one of the top 3 or the top? And what are we looking at? What's the criteria that we're looking at? So, we have to be more incremental. And then knowing that leadership in any area, it's shifting sand. So we're a leader today, but, if we looked at where we are 5 years from now, let's not forget to look at it 2, 3, 5 years from now and see, how has that shifted? And are we going in the right direction with those leadership decisions that we're making in that area? So that's it.
There you go. Okay, back to you guys.
Okay. Just as a quick response, I want to mention that we are still exploring the most reliable source that we have about greenhouse gas emissions per capita compared to other peer regions or global cities or something like that. So that's a measure that we're trying to button up and include in the technical appendix, just so we do have that context. And Councilmember Lindstrom, I appreciate those suggestions. We have a couple things about energy, but those are great additions to that. I think they'll complement well. So we now have the option to look at proposed measures for the 2050 policy areas if that's something that this body would like to spend time on this afternoon. Again, we had really great conversations at the Community Development and Environment Committees, and MPOSC has been very involved in the development of the park and trail measures. Those are all available on the program webpage, so we don't have the most updated versions in these document forms, and we didn't want to include a million more links for your additional materials this afternoon, but we can spend time with that if folks looked at a particular area or have a particular idea for a measure that they would like to discuss, or a topic area that they want to make sure is included somewhere in this collection of measures that we have proposed for this program. So turn it back to you.
I think just due to time, the link was provided on page 4, on slide 4. So if you want to go in there, just similar to how Councilmember Lindstrom, and if you see things that need to be added, changed, tweaked, just circulate it back to the group so that we can get the information out, if that works.
That works just fine, and we also have a feedback form to pick up on a theme. So you're welcome to use that information or to convey it via email. We'll make sure that all of that is responded to. So we'll skip that, and yes, in the interest of time, again, just a reminder that next week we will be back for an even shorter presentation than this one with those 2 components of our amendment, seeking your approval to release that for public comment. It will include our updated program narrative as well as the final technical appendix that includes all of these measures. So that's what we'll have for you next week.
So that gives you your timeline about when you have to give feedback to them.
Yes. We do have, I just want to highlight though, that part of our iterative process, we will be considering new measures over time. So we don't have to get everything in and everything right now. And we know we won't, which is why we've built in the iterative process. So this conversation will continue, maybe not as rapidly or intensely as we have in the last 8 weeks, but there should not be a sense of pressure that we need to, if we don't get it in right this minute, it will never happen. That's simply not the case, so.
Great comments. Any additional questions or comments from council members?
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, we're on to our final information item, which is advertising standards background. And we have Michael Schomer and George Henry to discuss.
We're coming from up front. You're just sitting everywhere today, George.
Indeed. It's a nice change of perspective.
If a legal question gets raised, though, while you're sitting there, who do we go to?
Do I need to go back and sit down over there to answer it?
Member Morales is now our. Thank you.
Madam Chair, council members, as noted, we're here today to provide a preview about Metro Transit advertising standards. So Metro Transit is looking to update their advertising standards, and here today, we just want to provide a little bit of background of that. I do want to note at the outset, I'm here to provide some general background. I'll be touching on some overarching legal principles, but given the general nature of that, I'm not giving specific legal advice. Also like to note, we are here to look at the big picture of advertising, so this is not the best forum to talk about specific advertisements, in particular because sometimes that can be a very complex analysis on a particular advertisement or a particular advertiser. So we'd like to be talking about general categories here today. But as you can see, I'll provide some legal background through the relevant case law, talk about some of the First Amendment standards of review to put the discussion in some context before handing it over to Mr. Schomer. So the first question is, who can advertise on transit? Unlike a private corporation that can freely decide who it's advertising with, there are limitations on a government entity. And thankfully, the Supreme Court has addressed this advertising issue. Back with the city of Shaker Heights in the 1970s, Mr. Lehman was looking to advertise his political campaign. The city said no. Mr. Lehman sued, and off we go with Lehman v. City of Shaker Heights. But when we're talking about advertising, in a legal context, what we're talking about is the Constitution. And very specifically, we look at the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. And if we want to get even more specific, government entities via the 14th Amendment. And in this context, we're looking at what type of forum is the government-controlled space where speech is occurring. And roughly in the case law, there are three different types of public forums. There's the traditional or designated public forum, so this is your park, your street, your sidewalk, or a city-owned theater. There is a limited public forum. The really good example would be your council meetings, where members of the public are allowed to address, but only on topics not on the agenda and limited to about 2 minutes per person. Also, case law has found social media, interior of City Hall can be this limited type space. And then there's also a non-public forum. And so that would be places like military bases, government employee offices, or interior of polling places. And the importance of looking at what type of public forum you're dealing with is a level of scrutiny the court is going to give to the government's decision about regulating speech in that area. And so, looking at that top level, in a traditional or designated public forum, the government entity is able to do reasonable time, place, or manner restrictions. But any restrictions based on content are given strict scrutiny, and that's the highest level of court scrutiny on a government action in the constitutional space. That means the government restriction needs to be narrowly tailored to a compelling government interest. Also, in this type of a public forum, viewpoint restrictions are prohibited. Thankfully, the Supreme Court has found that for transit, it is a non-public forum. And I briefly want to touch on the rationale from that case, again, to continue setting some of that context. So the Supreme Court realized or focused on the fact that in this setting, the government is primarily providing a service, as in the transit. So this is not the same as a public park or a street corner. And also the court looked at the administrative challenges of providing stricter scrutiny in this area. That includes concerns about favoritism, how people would see favoritism in the government's choices of what's going on, and also the limited space for politicians or other people trying to advertise. Presumably, everybody would want their face on the side of a light rail train. There's only so many of those. The other key consideration here was the fact that this is a captive audience. And one quote that we hear frequently in this case law from Justice Douglas is, in my view, the right of the commuters to be free from forced intrusions on their privacy precludes the city from transforming its vehicles of public transportation into forums for the dissemination of ideas upon this captive audience. Our citizens don't have a choice upon riding transit oftentimes. They're taking it to work, they're depending upon it to get to their daily activities, and therefore the space is viewed differently. This is important because the standard of review, the way the court looks at this, is very different in a non-public forum. The court gives much more deference to the government agency. So it's more the traditional arbitrary capricious standard of review. And the court is looking to make sure that the speech is reasonable and we're not suppressing a person's views. And then objectives, the reasonable objectives of minimizing the same standards you saw from that City of Shaker Heights case. So minimizing abuse, minimizing any type of appearance of favoritism, and the risk of imposing on a captive audience. So to take this back then to Metro Transit's advertising standards, And the criteria we're looking at, this is not the public square where anybody gets to stand up on their soapbox and provide their opinions. Part of the focus of our advertising standards is on the purpose of advertising, which is raising revenue to support the transit system. Under the arbitrary and capricious standard, it's also important to remain neutral. So if the council accepts advertising on one side of an issue, it needs to accept advertising on the other side of that issue as well. Remain neutral in what it's putting up on its transit system. You will also see, as we look at our advertising standards, we're trying to find a preference for clear lines. We're trying to minimize the gray area of the decisions being made by Metro Transit staff in going with this. You'll see one example that Mr. Schomer will touch on as far as who gets to advertise get out the vote efforts on transit. And one option is to limit that to just the Minnesota Secretary of State versus deciding which nonprofits may or may not be allowed to do that. And finally, we need to keep in mind that transit riders are a captive audience and keep that in our advertising standards from there. And so I touched on both these two standards of review to be clear that in the choices on the advertising standards, the more transit advertising looks like the public square, the closer it's going to get to a court deciding to provide that higher level of review of decisions over that advertising. With that, turn it over to Mr. Schomer.
Well, thank you, George. And just to reintroduce myself, my name is Mike Schomer. I am the relatively new Strategic Communications and Engagement Director. So thank you. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for the opportunity. George and I are really, what we're trying to do today is just give you a little bit of the background on this issue, because we'll be coming to you hopefully before the end of the year with some more specific proposal and new language for the standards. So with that, I just want to also acknowledge really quick in the audience, we have our marketing manager, Maria Cohn, with us in case we need any technical questions addressed. So thank you, Maria, for being here. All right, just a little bit of background about our advertising system. The system is coordinated with a contract with a company called Intersection. This is an advertising and tech firm that does similar services for a lot of the big transit systems across the country. We're in the 4th year of a 10-year contract with them. The annual revenue generated by our system last year was $5.7 million, and that number has been growing over time. Interesting in the conversations we've had with Intersection, there's something particularly appealing about transit advertising. What they're seeing in the world of radio and television is the audience is really splintering as there's more channels, more channel opportunities for people just to go different directions in those markets. And transit and outdoor still give them the kind of reach that they really want. So it's a particularly appealing system for many people. I don't think I have to run through all of the assets that we have out there, but just a refresher, we have signage on buses and trains, parking facilities, bus shelters, light rail platforms, and a lot of our other system facilities. We work with a number of different types of advertisers, ranging from Metro Transit and Met Council through commercial advertisers, government advertisers, and public service announcements and nonprofit advertisers. Our existing standards have been in place in some form for decades, but most recently they were adjusted in 2015. So that's the last time this has been touched. You'll see as you look through the document, I believe it was provided to you earlier, but if you get a chance to look at it, you'll see that it really is focused on protecting both the Metro Transit and Met Council brands, and then also the rider and customer experience. So you'll see a lot of language in the existing standards to that degree. As we look at updating and bringing to you some specific proposals in the months ahead, what we'll be trying to do is really making sure, as George said, we have that consistency and clarity in the language and try to draw as many clear lines for staff. You know, as ads come in, you want to make sure you've got some good rules of the road to make good decisions so that we have some fairness and some access to the system, but also when we make decisions, there's some useful information we can provide advertisers on why a decision was made one way or the other. A recent example, you alluded to this, George, the Get Out the Vote ads. We have received Get Out the Vote ad requests from a nonprofit, and as you look at that kind of ad, and again, we won't get into a lot of the details in this venue, but just thinking about when you have that sort of one type, at some point, you may also get a request from a different type of nonprofit that would want to run similar ads. So that's just an example of how we have categories of requests that come in, and we want to make sure as we adjust the language or any adjustments we make, respect that you want to have some consistency regardless of the exact entity that is making that request. Some other considerations we'll be making really around prioritizing brand and customer experience. We want to protect the Metro Transit and Met Council brands, and also make sure that, as you mentioned, the idea of that captive audience with the riders and people who are using the system, we want to make sure that they have as positive a system. You know, everything that we're doing at Metro Transit is built around trying to provide that positive experience for riders, and we want to make sure our advertising is no different. So that'll be a big factor for us to consider. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there is a real value in the advertising system that we have, not just for the organization itself, but also for these organizations out there that are trying to get messages in front of various parts of our community. And so we'll want to make sure we think about how we're providing fair access for community advertisers. And then also, finally, maximizing revenue opportunities. 5.7 million is a growing number over time. We'll want to make sure that we think about how we protect that and leverage that opportunity so that we can continue to provide a really good system. I'll just point out that some of that revenue actually can be used for improving the experience that riders have, whether it's vehicles or stations or signage even on the system. So want to make sure we're balancing all of these as we think about language updates. So with that, I think we do have some time. Again, this was really more about providing you some background and giving you some insights as we get closer to some specific proposals later on, hopefully in the fourth quarter still. But we did want to open it up for any questions or discussion you might have.
Thank you both, and I believe that our regional administrator had a couple things to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate the overlay of the presentation and the way you're approaching it. It takes complex topics and distills it down to the clarity. I just want to add a little bit of contextual setting. You know, I appreciate Mike's slide that shows the last time these were updated was 2015. And I think why now is a good question to be asking on something like this. And so what I would just share is part of the why now is because things that would have been viewed as in the public sphere, non-controversial in the past, there are just more things right now that are falling into categories due to polarization around us that are leading to significant challenges within the existing ad standards as we have them. And we've had a number of them over the course of this year that we've waded through with these standards, and there's a lot of gray, and I would say we are not, from my perspective, we are not setting our organization either through attorneys or Metro Transit up for success with clear enough lines. And in all fairness, I think it's understandable why some of the entities who have gone through the appeal process, some to getting things to ultimately run, some to not, so it's not like it's all one way or the other. I understand why they at times feel confused because there's a lot of change to some of these things in 2015 when the policy was passed. I just think would not have even been conversation at the time. And so we're trying to respond to a changing environment around us. And it was important to tee this up for the council in ways where you could, at a baseline, as policymakers, start here today and hear some of those questions. But I wanted to just point out, while some of this goes all the way to constitutional questions and it feels almost theoretical, this has been at different points with the general manager and myself and the previous chair and now the current chair. Like, this is one of these things that's been coming up on an almost weekly basis here in a new way over the past 6 to 12 months.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn it. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Cedarburg.
So are we saying that we're not advertising anything that's controversial? Is that the policy that we're setting out?
I don't,
Yeah.
Chair Barber, council member, I don't think that we're at a point today where we are really going to be making specific recommendations, but I think when I have worked with George and his team, just understanding the importance of consistency and thinking about if you're going to accept one of a type of category, you're opening up a perceived obligation, whether it's real or perceived, to accept others of that category. So we just want to make sure that as we open that up, that we're considering carefully.
And I guess, given the political climate, then is that who we want to be? So, I mean, I'll give an example of an advertisement which somebody may or may not have had, but Vaccinations. Flu shots are available, get vaccinated. Are we not going to put that on as an ad?
We'll find out.
I mean, you don't have to say yes or no, but huge controversy. So where are we drawing the line? We don't have to answer now, but I think we need to be a little braver and a little bolder and push the limits a little bit on the stronger side as opposed to the super safe side. I'm just saying.
I believe we're having this conversation because we feel the need to be clear. And I think that is what that boundary is we need, it needs to be clear so there's no questions if we're responding. Councilmember Johnson. Oh, are you, sorry?
I'm just saying that it seems like we're going to be going from everything I've heard and read and to the vanilla, very safe side. So, and if that's the policy that we have.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. I apologize. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Councilmember Cedarberger, everybody who's sitting here, I've been in this as a council member and mayor at the city of Plymouth. And I chatted a bit about this ahead of tonight's meeting with our transit policy work group, but we didn't have an art policy at the city. And we had people that wanted to donate art and create art and artists that groups were looking for our parks and our places. And we had to just come up with an art policy, which is an adjacent, I think, to this, because they convey messages and they'll be in public spaces and all of the things. And there was a wide spectrum of things even back then that we were looking at. And so when I saw this come forward, I'm like, yes, we can do this, because the worst time to be doing this is when there are lawsuits flying or hyper politics going on or favoritism. I mean, this is where you put your own boundaries up and you really put it to the test in many ways. And there's other examples out there so that we are being fair and we are following the Constitution and we are following case law to the best of our ability so that we have the best platform and information to work from. And we haven't done it for 10 years. And to our administrator's point, think about how much just communications has changed in the last decade. I would say over humanity, there's been political divides about everything. So we're just in a phase, and we always will be. So I'm very pleased at the work that you're starting to do. I think considering all the other things that we're doing here to be the best organization that we can be, this is just fundamental. And I do appreciate that we're not reacting in a moment, but we're trying to get, be forward thinking. And I don't think there's anything that's perfect, and it'll come back to all of us. And certainly I'm sure they'll do one-on-one conversations, but the time is now to do this. And I'm really thrilled that we're gonna see something come from this. And it will be just such a good foundation for us to make decisions from at Metro Transit. And even I know we do have art policies that I think are fairly adjacent and dovetail into this too. So I support the work we're doing, and this is a perfect time to do it. And we can think about all kinds of things in our heads right now, but let's get something out with the experts at hand, and then I think we're gonna have a good foundation to work from going forward.
Okay, Councilmember Lilligren, then Jenkins, then Cameron, then Carter.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this work, and I appreciate it. I'm glad we're moving into a direction of clarity and clear lines. I think that's super important. I had similar experiences during my time in municipal government, and I remember it was around wrapping electrical boxes with art, but then the sponsor would be listed, and so was it advertising or was it art? And absent clear lines in policy, 13 elected officials had to sit there and decide if something was art, and I thought that was kind of hilarious. So I have a question about the standard of review, and I want to use one of your slides as an example. It's the Keith Haring wrap on the LRT vehicle. Thank you. So this kind of goes to Councilmember Cedarberg's point. So Keith Haring, a controversial artist, right? He used controversial topics, and that was kind of his brand, right? And so, and even the statement "artists for everybody," that could move into a realm of disagreement, right? And so as we look at the standard of review, I'm wondering, especially George, if you could just sort of speak about how we would look at this RAP within the standard of review.
Chair, council member, and I think this touches some on Councilmember Cedarberg's comments as well. In taking a look at the current advertising standards, what we are looking at is section 1.02, touches on excluded advertising, and then is touched on a slightly different fashion in section 2.01, political or issue advertising. So we would be, under the current standards, taking a look at this of, is this, one is saying that the Metro Transit is looking to stay neutral on issues of public concern, and then is this advertising that promotes, opposes, or otherwise directly relates to an issue of public debate on economic, political, or social issues. This gets right into that line drawing, gray area decision making that happens on a lot of these advertisements as they come forward. In this moment in time, in this set of issues and circumstances we're living in now, does this touch on an issue of public debate on economic, political, or social issues? That language is there, again, in part to protect the non-public forum of our transit advertising. The more you stray from that, the more likely you are to be considered a designated public forum, and all of a sudden, you have a much less ability to restrict what is advertising on your system. I'm not sure if that was directly responsive to what you're asking for, but
I think it's as good as we can do right now. Thanks, George. I appreciate it.
thank you, Councilmember.
I thought this was an interesting example to use.
George, just to finish it, and so at the time when this was run, under that rubric, it was deemed to not be controversial by the standards George just applied.
Thank you, thanks.
All right, Councilmember Jenkins?
So Councilmember Lilligren teed it up and asked it. You know, I think for our understanding, we're going to set that divider, but I think I'm still would want to know more about where do we define what is controversial. Keith Haring is an example. If Kid Rock or Bad Bunny are coming for a concert, who decides whether that is controversial or not? That's the part which I don't think there probably is a crisp, clear answer to that, but I think that's always going to be a part of, we're drawing the line, but how clear can we make that line? And that's what I'd like to know, is how do we define that?
Okay, comments? All right, Councilmember Cameron and then Tyrone Carter.
Okay. So two questions. For the first, on this topic of controversy, I think we can get bogged down in that term, as you've all, this body is controversial. The existence of it is controversial. The wicked projects are controversial. Anything could be defined as that. And so I think a clear rubric, when I think about how that is defined, in a clear decision tree on whether this falls into that category of acceptable versus non-acceptable. And it sounds like that is something that we have, and that it is something that consistently we can revisit as it is required. But stress testing that rubric to make sure that the example that Councilmember Jenkins gave is reflective of that. So I guess that was more of a comment than a question. But then my other question is around the commercial usage of advertising space. And I think, when I'm thinking about my experience on transit, that, I only see commercial advertising. I think I see realtors on every single bus bench, but I never see them on the side of a bus. I don't know how those decisions are made. Could you talk a little bit more about the commercial aspect of it and how we are deciding on those elements within our system?
Chair Barber, Council Member, I don't have information specific to that today, but I'd be happy to follow up with you on that.
Councilmember Tyrone Carter.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, of course, we're in a public square, and we're all mindful of that, and really that's what this is all about. But I think we have to, as you pointed out, we have to be careful, maybe more so than in the past, unfortunately. But we have to also be courageous because of all we represent. And we have to be mindful at all times as we go forward. So we're making careful steps, maybe more careful than in the past. but we still have to make the right steps and to make sure that we're not kind of sinking in to what could be oppressive or seen as oppressive. So that's it.
All right, Councilmember Lee, and then Jenkins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. When I was first appointed 7 years ago, I believe I'm the second Hmong person appointed to the council, and I was lucky that the first Hmong person appointed to the council reached out to me, and he had a one-on-one with me, and he was appointed in '99 by Governor Ventura, and he said that back then it was their council that, if you pay attention to all our buses and trains, there's a literal logo that says a service of the Metropolitan Council. And it was his council in '99 that slapped that on our buses and trains. And he said that single phrase was very controversial, and the council members had to debate that for a while. And like Councilmember Cameron said, our very own existence as a body is controversial to some people. So it's interesting how what controversial means, even when it's our own words.
Councilmember Jenkins.
So I was thinking more about this, and my question is, in the past, I mean, it's not like we're the first ones talking about what is or isn't controversial. Do we have examples from the past where we have faced, whether it's a lawsuit or some challenge, where we've deemed something to be non-controversial and someone has thought it was, or vice versa? What have we had historically, and how do we address that?
We'll turn to R.A. O'Connor.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, I can't go further back, so I'll turn if anyone else has anything from the past. I'll just say from this year, I mean, they have gone through appeals process, and then beyond, I would call beyond appeals process, we have not faced any legal challenges to our current policy, as far as I'm aware, unless that's changed. No, we have not. But we've been monitoring that closely. And the only part I would add broadly to some of this is in multiple of those conversations, a piece that we've often said is make sure you think of the other side, to what George mentioned earlier, of the particular advertising you are looking to advertise for. Are you willing to accept the idea that that would then show up as well? And that has been an important thing that we have used that actually has helped to moderate a little bit as we go. I would note that as this conversation has continued.
Thank you. So let's expand it. What has happened in other transit scenarios? Is there case, I mean, we have 1974 case law, but are there cases that we've seen, say, in the last 5 to 10 years, and what have they addressed for the definition of controversy or whatever?
Chair, and I haven't done a deep dive into the case law recently on those issues, but certainly could do a little bit more looking. But talking with Intersection, our vendor in this area, I don't think there's a lot of litigation that's developed around this, partially because of the thorough advertising standards that the Metro Transit has and our partner agencies have as well.
Okay, cool.
Councilmember Johnson.
And I appreciate wanting to know more, because it's one of those, items that draws you in, and it's, you start to just imagine in your own head. I think tonight, though, is the precursor to getting the okay to do the work, and certainly they would always meet with anybody, and as you do that, you'll uncover things that will be very illuminating. But then, with more involvement from us, because they're bringing it to us today to kind of say, here's what's coming, we're going to get a lot that we can dig into and ask those questions, and maybe even ahead of that meeting, take some time to talk with them and go, well, what about this and what about that? Because we can all come up with endless ideas of this, that, or the other thing. But the goal, this is a policy move for us, and to put it into practice and update something that's 10 years old. And I just am signaling that I fully support that, and I can't wait to see what comes back, and I'll probably call you myself or whatever. And I think that's just kind of we're meeting them at the moment right now, and there will be more.
All right, anything additional? All right, if you do have additional questions or comments or want to talk, I'm sure George and Mike would be happy to entertain those conversations. So thank you both for being here. And with that, is there anything else for the good of the order this evening?
Madam Chair, do you want to mention anything on DBE stuff, or would you prefer Me too.
You can do, and I will just say that you'll be getting an additional communication with some more detail tomorrow or Friday about the current status, but if you wanted to add anything?
No, I think that's good. We just wanted to make sure, stay tuned. We're working, there'll be communication going out to all employees next week as well regarding the interim final rule as it applies to DBEs and projects, and what does that mean here as people are working through that. We've been working very hard on it all week, and we were with MnDOT in a meeting right before this as we try to coordinate with other agency partners in Minnesota. And so more to come, but just wanted to let you know that that continues to be worked through.
And as you get the communications, definitely reach out to either Ryan or myself, and we'll answer any questions that we can. All right, Councilmember Johnson.
And just, Madam Chair, on that point, if it can ever come to management, because we, that's a home for us to always know where we sit at some point, that would be great too.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, you will see likely there will be something coming to management actually next week on this very topic.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Chair. And with Pacheco out, I will also add that maybe getting him up to speed with the Equity Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. All of that will happen. We've been in a very have to react fast kind of situation. So a lot of those actions and things will start happening over the next week or so. But appreciate it. Anyone else? All right. If there's nothing else, then we can be adjourned.